Hi there, welcome to the channel. My name's Teresa and I'm so pleased that you're joining me here at Teresa Joy Fine Art, which is your go-to spot for relaxing drawing tutorials that you can follow along with in real time. In this video, I'll walk you through my process for drawing this little monkey with colour pencils. I used Faber Castell Polychromos, Caran Luminance and Caran Pablo pencils for this project. The complete tutorial is over in the art membership on my website now, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. But in this video, I'll show you some of the techniques used. So let's take a closer look at the process. I'm working on drafting film for this portrait, so the line drawing is on a piece of paper under the film rather than being on the film itself. And this means that I don't have to worry about erasing the lines as I go. The monkey's got really quite vibrant eyes, so after adding the outline around the eye with a dark brown pencil, I add some bold oranges and yellow colours. Over that, I use one of my favourite earthy orange colours from the Polychromos range of pencils from Faber Castell, and that's terracotta. The Polychromos range of pencils is known for including beautiful transparent colours, but I think that the terracotta pencil is even more transparent than most of the other pencils in the range. So it adds a really earthy orange glaze to the colour, but lets the other brighter colours show through underneath. This drawing's not actually very big. There isn't much room in the eye, so dotting a black pencil into the middle of the eye is all I can do here. Once the eyes are in place, I start to add the fur around the eye. I often use a light grey pencil as a base layer, and I'm always asked why I use a grey base layer rather than going straight in with a stronger, more vibrant colour. There are times when I might need a brighter base layer, but as a general rule, when drawing fur on animals, the colours are more muted and natural looking. And I find that adding a grey base layer helps to keep all those colours that are going to go over the top of the base layer a little more muted and a little more natural looking. There isn't much tooth on the drafting film, so there's not much room to add lots and lots of layers like you would if you were working on a hot press paper or pastel mat, for instance. So I don't feel the need to add the grey base layer everywhere on the film, but I'm adding it around the eyes to keep those pink colours that are going to be applied next a little more muted and a little more desaturated. And that helps to keep the skin looking more natural. I find that adding the dark areas around the eye quite early on help me to start to make sense of the eyes. Getting those dark areas in will make the irises pop and start to add some dimension into the eye from a very early stage. I'm using a mix of browns and pink tones around the eye to start to add that texture. No matter what surface I'm working on with colour pencils, I'll always use light pressure, but it is particularly important to use light pressure on the drafting film because pressing on hard will fill what little tooth the drafting film has very quickly, and it can also create an indent in the actual film, which might also show up in the finished portrait. I'm using a very dark pencil, but not black at this stage, to start to add the depth to the eye sockets of the monkey. I may go in with black later on, but I always like to see how dark I can get with the dark brown pencils first, and then just top up areas with the black if I need to. This is charcoal grey from the Caran Pablo range of pencils that I'm using here, and it's one of my favourite dark pencils when I'm drawing animals. I use it all the time if I need a warm, dark brown black colour. Once I filled the tooth of the film in, I find that it can be really useful to add texture with a white Polychromos pencil. I don't press on hard with the pencil, but I gently pass the pencil backwards and forwards over the surface to push the previous layers of pencil out of the way. It's a similar technique to using the craft knife or the slice tool or the eraser to move pigment, but the Polychromos pencil can provide soft, delicate looking pencil strokes that can create soft and delicate looking fur. Once the eyes are in place, I move on to the lighter fur over the eyes and up towards the forehead. I'm applying a light layer of the base layer by keeping the pencil tipped on the side a little so that I've got a broader pencil stroke, and I'm using a broader part of the pencil tip on the film. A flat end on the end of the pencil helps to give a smooth, even coverage, and light pressure is also important. After that, I start to add the brown pencils, some darker and some more of an ochre colour, to start to build the texture into the fur. I use directional pencil strokes, and I'm always paying attention to the reference photograph so that I know which direction the fur is travelling in. I lift my pencil off at the end of each pencil stroke to create those wispy ends, just as it would be on the actual fur of the monkey. I want to make sure that I don't draw in lots of parallel lines. This wouldn't look particularly natural. I find that adding the fur strokes quite fast without thinking about it too much will help to create a more realistic looking fur. To add the texture into the fur, I start with the lighter pencils and I work darker as I go. And as I'm adding the darker colour, I want those lighter colours underneath to show through. I'm not trying to build up a solid colour. I won't be able to add the volume with just one layer of pencil. It will take several layers to get the volume and the depth that I'm looking for into the fur. I want to add darker colours into the fur to create the volume and texture, but I don't always want those colours to be really vibrant. So in some of the darker areas, I'm using a dark grey pencil to keep the fur looking natural but a little more desaturated. Once I've added a few layers of the ochre and brown pencils, blending with the lighter grey pencil as I go, I want to start thinking about adding the negative spaces between the lighter bits of fur with the dark brown pencils again. And this starts to add the volume and the depth into the fur. I want to pay particular attention to the edge of the face to make sure that the fur is wispy and feathers out away from the monkey's face in this area. On the section just above the eyes, I start adding a mid-grey pencil, adding the fur between the eyes and the area at the top of the head. I want the two sections to join so that it looks like fur on one face. I don't want it to look as if we've got two separate sections here. So I spend some time making sure that the transition between the two areas looks natural. I'm bringing that dark pencil in again to transition the eye sockets into the section of fur. I don't want a harsh edge between the two areas. Sometimes all I can get in are little dots or tiny dashes, and that'll be enough to suggest the texture of the fur. I'm still paying attention to the reference photograph. I'll stop regularly, I'll sit back and I'll check that the fur's going in the right direction. This is really important. Whilst the direction of the fur is not itself important to making something look real, and by that I mean you can make something look realistic by just using contrast, your lights and your dark values. But if you are going to put the direction of the fur in, it does need to travel the correct way so that it shows the form and structure of the animal's skull. As I add the ear onto the side of the head, I switch to circular pencil strokes along the edge of the ear. I'll often do this because I find circular strokes help me sort of colour in the lines and make sure that I keep a nice, neat but soft edge along the ear. And from there I'll start to feather the pencil strokes from the outer edge of the ear towards the face. Once I've added an area in, I'll often go back and see how that might have affected a previous area that I've already worked on. I'll always go back and check and often make adjustments to those previous areas. This might mean adjusting values, or it could be making adjustments to the transition from one area to another. I'm often asked how to achieve a nice soft application of the coloured pencil when using drafting film. And my top tip would be that as long as you have a flattish end on the end of the pencil or a blunter pencil and use soft pressure, the pencils will glide over the drafting film and produce a nice, even, soft application of the pigment. Moving on to the fur on the lower part of the cheek, I move to a green beige colour, adding again in the direction of the fur. Just as before, I start to build the textures and the volume using a darker yellow green colour. And again, just as before, I use the darker grey pencil to start to add the darker values to keep the saturation lower so as to not make the colours too vibrant as I add the volume into the fur. Once I've got quite a bit of pencil down and I've got the darker colours in, I want to add some softer areas to build up that volume. So I'm using a Tombow Mono Zero eraser to bring in softer, larger, broader sections of fur. I follow the direction of the fur again as best I can, looking at the reference photograph. It looks quite sketchy and clumsy at this stage, but I'll go on to refine the fur with the pencils afterwards, so I'm not worried if it doesn't look exactly as I want it to look at this stage. The nose includes some lovely earthy, muted pink and brown colours. I start with the light warm grey base layer again, and then use the pink colours to pick out areas and shapes from the reference photograph. Once the underlayers are in, I want to plot in the landmarks. And by landmarks, I mean areas that jump out at me from the reference photograph. They're easy to spot. I use a black pencil to plot in areas like the nostrils and the side of the nose because they are my landmarks in this area. From there, I use a mid-tone brown pencil to add shapes to start to build the structure of the nose and face. I plot it in with a colour that's fairly neutral, and by that I mean a colour that I'll be able to adjust quite easily as I start to refine the area. So not a really strong colour that will be hard to adjust at a later stage. I'm back with my dark browns again to start to refine the shapes and add a little texture. I want to make sure that the edges of the area blend nicely with the area next to it. I'm always thinking about how one area transitions into another area. Once the darker textures are in, I'll go backwards and forwards between the lighter and the darker pencils, blending the layers a little bit and topping up more vibrant colours, and then refining the shapes and the textures as I go. Again, I use that technique where I push the pigment out of the way with a lighter pencil to add a highlight on the bottom of the nose. And I find it's a technique that works really well for me when I'm working on drafting film, to add highlights, to add texture, or maybe just remove a bit of pigment out of the way. If I have completely saturated and filled the tooth of the paper, I find this technique just helps to push a bit of pigment out of the way so that I can top it up with more layers and more colours as needed. I follow a similar process on the neck of the monkey, but this time my pencil strokes are longer to represent the longer fur on the monkey's neck. At this stage now, I don't need that line drawing that is underneath the drafting film any longer. I like to remove the line drawing as I get to the latter stages. I carry on working on the neck, blending the layers of fur again to create volume, working from light to dark with the pencils, blending as refining as I go. One of the final stages of the drawing was for me to blend with a lighter pencil, and I'm using the buff titanium from the Caran Luminance range to do this here. I find it's a really nice opaque pencil, and it blends, it desaturates, and it pushes those pencil layers underneath together to create a soft looking fur overall. At the very end, I take the precision cutter to add a few whiskers, a few stray hairs, and a few little spots of light that are catching on the skin. And that's it. That was a quick run through as to how I drew this little monkey on drafting film with coloured pencils. If you want to follow along with the full tutorial, you can find that over in the art membership. If you've got any questions, or if there's anything that you would like to see in these tutorials, leave me a comment and let me know. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.